Well, it looks like Argonaut is back in business because they just released themselves a Croc remaster. Croc, the Legend of the Gobbos. The game was originally on PS1, PC, and Sega Saturn, and here's the backstory about this. It was supposed to be a 3D Yoshi game, and they were going to make it, but Nintendo said no, and thus ended the partners between the two companies. But it didn't all mean that they wouldn't even make a Nintendo 64 game, because they made Buck Bumble. I think that's the only game they made on the 64, but that's pretty much what I will just say. So, here's the tale about this game. Yes, you can play your modern systems if asking. And on PC, it's a GOG exclusive. But if you do get it on GOG, it comes with the original version of the game that you guys can play. I should also mention that you guys can switch between the original graphics and the new graphics at any given point in the game, either by going to the options menu and playing around with the game settings, having CRT filters, or just, press the select button and that's about it. So, Croc, you have to go and stop the evil mage, and basically Croc was raised by Gobbos, your friends, your family, and the evil magician decided to capture them, and it's up to you to stop the evil, and that's about it. I want to also mention this game will go on to have a sequel and a couple of more other games. And the game would sell well on all three platforms that came out originally, and there were plans to have a TV series, but it never happened. Although there is bonus content in the game that you guys can pretty much read all the materials, the magazine covers, and whatever, including some of the script that was supposed to go on with the TV series itself. If this game, in terms of remaster, does pretty well, they'll pretty much give the sequel the same exact treatment. So, if you guys gonna like what you're gonna see, then by all means. Anyways, originally the game had tank controls. I'm not making this up. Yeah, I played this based on the PS1 version back then. It basically used the tank controls, which is kind of odd if you ask me. But despite that, it would utilize the R stick in that one. But for some weird reason, they took away that feature in the sequel. But we'll get to the sequel at some point in the near future. So you use your attacks by stomping or by tail whipping. You can swim, you can jump, and there's obstacles. You can collect some of the gems, which will take you to a special room to rescue the last Gobbo, which you're going to need to rescue the Gobbos, and you're also going to need to collect gems for a reason. The gems, depending on how much you collect, will add up into the later portion of the whole thing. What it means is that when you complete a level, the gems will go on to add into your little bank. Once it reaches 100, you'll gain an extra life. By gaining extra life, you also get by collecting hearts. So look for hearts and collect many gems as you can. Oh, and if you get hit, then your gem's gonna scatter all over the place, and it's not gonna be too good for you. Yeah, you're gonna be losing a lot. It's kind of like how Sonic loses a whole bunch of rings, and then, you can't get anything after that, but barely. Yeah, so make sure you think about that too. There's boxes you can smash up. There's somewhat puzzles to solve in terms of trying to get the boxes to break open, because there's these little platforms you can pretty much unlock by pressing a button. But sometimes they're locked in a cage because you need a key. And to find a key, there's two different ones. There's like a silver one, and there's also this gold one. They all depend on what they work for and whatever. There's also going to be some boss fights for you guys to go through, but they should be easy to understand, but at the same time, they might be a little bit complicated to fight, but it just depends on who you're fighting against. In each world, there'll usually be like two bosses. One is like halfway in the world, and then the other one's the last part, and then that's about it. There's also these jigsaw things, but I'm never able to find them for some weird reason. It's also crazy to say that this game doesn't even look like a PS1 game, but that's just something that can be pushed to its limits with the PS1 as far as I can tell, because Spyro and Crash Bandicoot did it. And it's also pretty funny because from what I've heard, Nintendo thought the game looked pretty impressive. Or something like that. It's hilarious. I hate it when they always reject stuff like big time game developers will always reject projects only to later be proven wrong. But even though the game was a commercial success, the series just wasn't a bad future. And the reason I say this is because when they released Croc 2, it didn't sell well, and neither did the other games they released, which is kind of weird. I mean, if you really think about it, this game sold over like 3 million copies from what I've read, but at the same time, the sequel didn't do that type of stuff. I should mention about the remasters that if you want to play in like the old school way for whatever reason being, you can use the D-pad to do such thing. It's hilarious. But yeah, there's a lot of stuff you guys can mess around in in-game settings and basically play any system you really want to. Some of the stages too even has their own remix versions of the same music, like the winter and whatever. I think when it comes to Croc, I think some of you guys should give it a chance. Because if we're going to get the sequel, get remastered, then this is by the biggest way we should definitely go for. In fact, I have heard they've hinted on making a Dreamcast version of Croc 2, which was supposed to be in development, but never happened back then. So there is a possibility that a Dreamcast version might actually come to life, and they seem to hint at this on Twitter. Yeah, they hinted this in the social media. Sometimes it could happen, but who knows? Only the future will tell us. I mean, it happened with Postal 1 of all things, and I already talked about that game. By all means, I think Croc is just a silly little game you can play. Sometimes you'll find some fun times playing it, but other times you might find it frustrating, and you'll probably see why once you guys get the grips on the game itself. But yeah, old school controls or fully analog controls. I mean, look, the original had analog controls, but it didn't even mean it was the superior way, because it was still tank controls regardless. So anyways, Croc is back, and we'll have to see if there's going to be any new games in lineup for Croc in the near future. Or maybe some of the other Argonaut games that might get a remaster, or potentially get itself a re-release in some sort of different ways.